All right, let's get into it. We're going back to the early 90s, a time way before the internet, way before social media, to unpack one of the most incredible, most audacious financial scandals in India's history. It's a story about massive ambition, a little bit of greed, and one man who literally shook the entire economic foundation of a nation. So, picture this. The date is April 22nd, 1992. A very nervous employee from the State Bank of India, his name is Sharad Ballari, he walks into the offices of the Times of India. He finds this journalist, Sucheta Dalal, and he says these words, and with that, he sets off a chain of events that is going to expose a fraud on a scale nobody thought was possible. And behind that closed door, Bellary drops an absolute bombshell. 500 crore rupees. You have to understand, back in 1992, this was a mind-boggling amount of money. And he's claiming it had just poof, vanished from the books of the State Bank of India, which was and is the country's biggest and most trusted bank. 500 crore. Just gone, without a single trace. So of course, Sucheta Dalal asks the obvious question, who on earth could possibly pull off a fraud this big? And the whistleblower gives her just one name, a name that was already a legend on the stock exchange, Harshad Mehta. So who was this guy, right? How does a boy from a pretty humble, lower-middle-class family get so powerful that he could bring India's biggest bank to its knees? See, to understand the scam, you first have to understand the man. Harshad Mehta's journey, it wasn't some overnight success story. Nope. It was a calculated, decade-long climb from the absolute bottom of the Bombay Stock Exchange, the BSE, to its very, very peak. This was his whole philosophy, summed up in one line. Risk hai, to ishq hai. It basically means if there's risk, there's romance. He believed risk wasn't something you run away from, it was something you run towards. And that belief is what pushed him from a dead-end job right into the chaos of stockbroking, hell-bent on making a name for himself. And man, what a rise it was. He starts out in the early 80s as what they called a jobber. Think of it as a low-level floor trader. By the middle of the decade, he has his own firm, Grow More. But the real game changer, 1990. That's when he gets into the money market. And within just 1 year, he wasn't just Harshad Mehta anymore. He was the big bull, the undisputed king of Dalal Street. Now, you gotta understand, the stock market is always a battleground of ideas. You had Harshad leading the bulls. These were the eternal optimists who believed the market was always on its way up. And on the other side, his big rival, Manu Mundra, a guy they called the Black Cobra. He led the bears, the pessimists who made their money when stocks went down. This rivalry, this fight, it defined the entire era. Harshad's influence just became legendary. I mean, he wasn't just a broker. He was a full-blown celebrity. People called him the Amitabh Bachchan of the stock exchange. Every single move he made was watched. Every tip he gave was followed by thousands. If Harshad bought a stock, you better believe everyone else was buying that stock too. But here's the thing, his real genius, and the source of all that power, it wasn't just in picking stocks. No, it was in finding and exploiting a hidden, really complex system that almost nobody understood. The money market. And this is the absolute heart of the scam. The entire system, believe it or not, balanced on this one simple piece of paper, the bank receipt, or BR. Just think of it like an IOU note between banks. So when one bank sold government securities to another, they'd issue a BR as a promise to deliver the actual security papers later. The whole thing was built on trust. So here's how it was supposed to work, by the book. It's a really simple, closed loop. Bank A needs cash, so they agree to sell securities to Bank B. Bank B cuts a check for Bank A. In return, Bank A gives Bank B that bank receipt. Simple, right? A clean transaction, just between two banks. But Harshad found a loophole, a massive one. He inserted himself right in the middle. So now, instead of the money going from bank to bank, it went through him. A bank would literally give him a check for hundreds of crores. And here's the crazy part. It was made out to his personal account. He then had about 2 weeks, what's called a float period, before he had to deliver that money to the other bank. And in those 14 days, he would pump all that cash into the stock market, drive prices sky high, make a fortune for himself, and then, just in the nick of time, he'd return the original amount. The banks were happy, and Harshad pocketed millions in profits. And with this system, he created an endless fountain of cash that flowed directly into his accounts. He wasn't just a broker anymore. He basically became the market itself. And his wealth, his lifestyle, well, that became the stuff of legend. At his absolute peak in 1992, his personal net worth was estimated to be 4,000 crore rupees. Now, to put that into perspective for you, adjusted for inflation today, that would be well over 20,000 crore rupees. The guy was one of the single biggest taxpayers in the entire country. I mean, the stories were just wild. He finds out his rival, a guy named Ajay Kadia, had booked the only imported Lexus coming into the country for 45 lakhs. So what does Harshad do? He walks into the dealership and offers 55 lakhs on the spot, 10 lakhs extra just for the satisfaction of snatching it away from his competitor. On Dalal Street, this popular saying started going around, Mehta na Rajma, market majma. It loosely translates to, when Mehta is in form, the market is in bloom. He was seen as this messiah who could do no wrong, a guy who was single-handedly lifting the market to heights nobody had ever seen. But you know how these stories go. A system built on a loophole, especially one this big, it can't last forever. As Harshad's power grew, so did the scrutiny. And the very institutions he was using to print money started to realize that something was very, very wrong. It started as a trickle. First, the Reserve Bank of India, the central bank, they start sniffing around, noticing some weird irregularities. That suspicion leaks to the press, leading to that article by Suchita Dalal. Soon after, boom, the Income Tax Department raids Harshad's home and his office. And that forces the State Bank of India to launch its own internal audit to figure out just where in the world all this money was going. And the SBI audit? Well, it uncovered something absolutely horrifying. A 574 crore rupee hole in their books. A massive shortfall in their government securities account. And the trail for all that missing money? It led directly to one mid-level employee. That employee's name was Sitaraman. When his bosses finally cornered him, demanding to know where the bank receipts for 574 crores were, he cracked. He confessed. The BRs weren't lost. They were with Harshad Mehta. And that was the smoking gun. The first direct, undeniable link connecting Harshad to all that missing bank money. With that one confession, the entire house of cards just began to collapse. What started as a quiet internal audit was about to explode into the biggest financial news story the country had ever seen. In a pretty stunning move on April 21st, Harshad actually returns 500 crores to SBI. He's trying to plug the hole, just make the whole problem go away. His rivals were completely shocked that he could even produce that much cash so quickly. But they were not about to let him off the hook that easily. No way. The very next day, they made sure that a whistleblower went to the press. And that brings us right back to where this whole story started. So the expose that followed brought the stock market crashing down, and it completely ended Harshad Mehta's reign as king. But it leaves us with this huge, lingering question. Was he just a master criminal who found and exploited loopholes? Or was he a kind of visionary who just exposed the deep, deep flaws in a financial system that was